Hello dear students, how are you? Wish you are all well and healthy, and welcome to our first online lesson. Today's lesson will be about speciation through isolation. So the main idea of our lesson today is the isolation of populations can lead to speciation. First of all, let us understand what is the meaning of speciation. Speciation is the rise of two or more species from one existing species. So, if gene flow between two populations stops for any reason, the populations are said to be isolated. So, when populations become isolated, there will be no gene flow between them. As these populations adapt to their environments, their gene pools may change. Random processes such as mutation and genetic drift can also change gene pools, so all of these changes add up over many generations. With time, the two isolated populations become more and more genetically different. Individuals in one population may also begin to look and behave differently from individuals in the other population, and this is what we mean by speciation. So now, reproductive isolation. What do we mean by reproductive isolation, and how reproductive isolation will happen? Reproductive isolation occurs when members of different populations can no longer mate successfully. Sometimes members of the two populations are not physically able to mate with each other. In other cases, they cannot produce offspring that survive and reproduce. So reproductive isolation between populations is the final step of becoming separate and isolated. So how populations can become isolated? Actually, several kinds of barriers can prevent mating between populations, leading to reproductive isolation. These include behavioral, geographical, and temporal barriers. Let's start with the first barrier, guys. Behavioral barriers. Behavioral barriers include differences in courtship or mating behavior. So chemical scenes, courtship dances of birds, and courtship songs of frogs are sexual signals used to attract mates. Changes in these signals can prevent mating between populations. Number 2, geographic barriers, and actually geographic barriers are the most commonly studied type of isolation. So geographic isolation involves physical barriers that divide a population into two or more groups. These barriers can include rivers, mountains, dried lake beds, and others. Number 3 is temporal isolation, and temporal isolation exists when timing prevents reproduction between populations. These differences in timing can lead to speciation. For example, two tree species that grow on the Monterey Peninsula in California are very closely related. However, they have different pollination periods. The Monterey pine sheds its pollen in February, while the beech pine sheds its pollen in April. So these pine species have likely evolved through temporal isolation. So that's all for today. Thank you guys, and see you inshallah next lesson.